All right, welcome back once again. We have another story. And I say that every time, but this is what makes our lives. This is what really truly gets us together because we have the ability to be able to talk about some of the things in the past and some of the things that we're currently doing today. Drew is with me. Frankly, Drew, we've just met and we've already talked, what, 2, 3, 4 times or so, and just on different topics. And I feel like we're really truly kind of running the parallel lines, and I absolutely love that. And that's why I wanted you to get on here because you've got a lot of good value. Got a lot of things. I'm not going to steal any of your thunder, but in order to get started, well, first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your day. Greatly appreciate that. But jumping in here, 30 seconds. We just meet in the elevator. Who is Drew?
I am. I am who I am. Who I am. Who you see is who you get, man. It's authentic. So, Tim, it's a pleasure to meet you, Drew, father of three, and I not only could die for my kids, I live for my kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we were actually talking in the green room right prior to that. So I love the fact you said authenticity. And because oftentimes when and so if you're listening to this on the podcast, you might have to switch over and go look at YouTube because we'll post a video there. But a lot of people blur their back screens. And you said, okay, look, I'm going to just leave it. It's like, this is who I am, man. I'm just going to leave it. We're just going to rock and roll. And I actually appreciate that. I really do because it shows a lot of like, hey, you get me. This is where I'm at. This is just who we are. So, all right, getting back on track. That was my little rabbit hole. We're gonna dive down for a minute.
I love be in the rabbit hole just for a little time. Just don't stay in it. That's what
Exactly. So, okay, so getting started. What were the narratives that you had growing up that you said, man, this is how I'm going to live my life. This is how we're going to, and again, it could have been something that was exemplified for you. You saw how your parents lived and you said like, I'm just going to automatically do that, or something that somebody said that really impacted you. But we often talk about this from the aspect of what were the false narratives that you believed life was going to be like when you became an adult.
Absolutely. I mean, just by really diving into this types of stuff recently, learning how our belief systems are formed at a young age. I mean, honestly, I mean, my parents married over 50 years. Honestly, I don't recall them yelling at each other. They communicated very well. I do recall, Dad traveled a lot during the week. Central America, he worked for IBM, so during the week, my mother like kind of like raised us, and it's interesting because I would like be outside and come back with like a cut on my knee. And oh, what were you doing? I was climbing a tree. Don't climb a tree, And she meant it all well, but when a woman is raising a boy, it's not the same as a man raising a boy. It just isn't because we are who we are, and so we weren't. So I never had a skateboard. We weren't allowed to have guns in the house, even water guns. I mean, like water guns.
Mm.
And I also learned that there was a reason why that happened with that my mother didn't allow that is because there was a story in her generations back of her mother's brother's cousin or something accidentally shot himself with a gun
Mm.
that was in the closet of a convenience store because they immigrated from the Middle East. And so it would have been nice to know that story as to that was the why.
Yeah.
So we were told, don't do this, do this, and I loved my parents and respected them, and I looked up to them, and I, for the most part, did what they said. I mean, there were times I would try to, stretch it a little and get caught. I was
Don't
never
we all
able
though?
to.
Kind of, we do
We
that.
do, but I was never able to lie and not feel guilt. It was the
Yeah.
weirdest thing. But I'd say growing up, it was like if you do the right thing, whatever the right thing is, passed down by generations. You go to school, you could go from high school, you go to college, and then you graduate. You go to graduate school, you get married, you have kids, and rinse and repeat. And I kind of was taught that life was linear. Like if you do it this way, things are going to be fine. And that was really a myth. And it's not really malicious on anybody's part. It's what we're all taught,
Yeah.
generations and generations and generations. You do the right thing and everything will work out. Well, it doesn't work out that way, and sometimes the right thing is always the right thing. And even if the result doesn't work out, you don't change not
The right
not
thing.
doing the right thing. you don't chase results, but I chased results as a kid. If I would do something the right way and it didn't work, I try to buck the system, or at least find out why people are telling me that. So, yeah,
So
I
how
kind
would
of
you how would you sum that up? Like if you were saying, okay, look, if I look, and this is obviously we're hindsight, we're looking back on it,
yeah,
but
yeah,
how would you sum that up as what you would set as the way that you were going to live your life?
yeah.
How would you sum that up as a narrative?
I learned not to take risks. I learned to do the safe thing, and that was not beneficial when I got older. So my narrative growing up was just be conservative, be cautious, don't take risks, be careful, that kind of thing. And I did that, and for the most part, it worked until it didn't.
Wow.
And yeah,
Yeah, so was that primarily? It sounds like it was actually influenced by several things, and you mentioned that your mother had certain rules and regulations and ways of living that were passed down, like you just said, just because of
mhm,
other past experiences, which
right.
you didn't. Right, when you said you didn't have a why, man, that like hit me because I always, anytime somebody gives me a rule, it's like I want why are we doing that? And it sounds like you didn't necessarily always have the whys, but as you look at that, what would you say the primary influence was for creating or crafting? Was it an example? Was it because of the way you were raised? Was it where did that come from?
Well, it seemed to work for my parents. I mean, I saw how close they were. I was close with my sisters, so I always like wanted what they had, the intact family, and to kind of marry somebody similar to my mom and try to be similar to my dad. So the thing is, I tried to recreate what they had, and that can't be done. And there were many times where I wanted to do something different, and I chose not to because I saw it worked for mom and dad. And so, um, that's really where I learned it by example.
Hmm.
It worked for them, so it should work for Drew, and that's kind of how I played until it stopped working.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
How long did you live that way then? And this is obviously we're going to transition a little bit into some of the changes and the adjustments.
yeah,
And like you just said, I
yeah,
kind of sense that there's a story coming. It worked until it didn't, and I'm sure that there's a story coming with
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
But like, how did that transition into? Because obviously going through high school, going through college, and then entering the early adult life,
Yeah.
like kind of walk us through some of that.
Well, I mean, when I went off to college, there was I wanted to go to. I live in Jersey. I wanted to go to school at Duke University in North Carolina. That was my way of getting away,
Mm,
so I could be independent, so I could do what I wanted to do without thinking what would mom say, what would dad say, kind of thing. And I did not get into that school. The ones that I got into, probably the furthest away was probably 3 hours, and then part of me was saying that's too far away. So I ended up going to school at Fairfield University in Connecticut, hour and a half away. It
mm,
was just enough to be away and still able to come home when I wanted to. But when I was up there, I did test myself. I
mm,
tested. I had fun. I mean, there were times where when you're talking about, I was always told don't do drugs. So the marijuana thing, right? I remember having so many opportunities and like saying, no, I'm not going to do it. It's not the right thing. And I didn't until years later.
mm,
But college helped me break out a little bit. And I still, I remember doing a lot of child stuff, practical jokes, all that. It was fun. I do remember though when I graduated college, I did stay for 2 more years and I worked full time up there. But once I went to the workforce, into the hospital because I worked in the healthcare for 24 years. The minute I took that full time job at the first hospital, something changed. I don't know if it
mm.
was me saying, "Okay, now I'm an adult. This is the real world. Take it seriously." I took myself too seriously. I took life too seriously,
Wow.
and I let the inner child in me just. I kept telling him to be quiet, and
Mm,
and it that hurt me. It wasn't my authentic self, and
mm,
that's I didn't realize it at the time. I guess at the time I really didn't feel comfortable in my own skin, but I didn't know that. I know
mm.
now I didn't because you're able to look back and compare. But I would say when I went off to college, it helped me break out, but then I let myself go right back into it.
So in college, was it sounded like it was kind of a mix of, all right, look, I know I need to do the right thing, but yet I also want to experience a little bit more and kind of break out a little bit from what I felt like. I'm assuming, so I'm putting this on, so please forgive me, but
Yeah.
it was more along the lines of I needed to just kind of break out of my shell a little bit and stretch those boundaries that I had been living in. Um, what did that do internally? How did that impact your confidence, and how did that like affect the way that you saw yourself?
Yeah, no, that's a good question because I know that I was always sheltered by mom and dad because they were, worried something bad would happen, So when you're overprotected and you're sheltered, you don't get to experience some things. So it felt good to experience that stuff. I didn't in a way, I guess maybe a little bit resentment on my mom and dad for not allowing me to spread my wings because a lot of the people up there got to do stuff I never got to do. And it's not bad stuff. I mean, I never skied in my life because I
Hmm.
was given every given opportunity. People did
Yeah.
out there, so always a little bit of resentment. Not their fault. I also didn't have the tools cognitively to really process that in a better way.
Hmm.
I realize
Yeah.
now they were trying to do their best as a parent. Back then, I'm
Right.
thinking, why wouldn't you let me do that? Just because it didn't work for them, that kind of thing. So some
Yeah.
resentment, but honestly, it was good. It was good. I do wish I didn't revert though when I went to the work life. I
Well,
mean,
let's jump into that. I mean,
yeah,
so you
yeah,
stretched, you started having a little bit more of a good experience, and all of a sudden you hit work life, and then something must have clicked where it's like, okay, I have to act this way, I have
mm,
to do this thing, I have to. What you are calling is doing the right thing.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, when you the having your uh, initial job be in a hospital, a teaching hospital, it is serious there. A lot of stuff is life and death. Now, even though I wasn't a clinical person, I did work with many caregivers. The doctors and the nurses who touched the patient. So I'm like, this is serious business. When I worked in the operating room, patients on the table, Drew, I need this. It's life. It is really life and death. So I learned like almost to take everything that seriously, which I wasn't able to differentiate. But that was, when you work in a hospital setting, especially in the operating room, it is serious business and you can't mess around. And yeah, I guess the challenge was to be able to um, let my hair down in less serious situations. But
So was
that
that
was.
so you felt the impact? I mean, obviously, like you said, it's life and death, and so therefore
Mm,
you had the stakes of the game were much higher. And with the stakes being so much higher in college, probably not feeling that way, but stepping into that quote unquote real world or into the business world, and all of a sudden the stakes are now astronomical, and you've got tons of responsibility. So you revert back to what you said as far as doing the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, but I also had high aspirations. You figure
Hmm.
I'm 20, 23, 24 years old, and immediately I'm in these high powered meetings in the boardroom with like the president and the chief operating officer and all this, and they're taking me seriously. And then I'm thinking, oh wow, I want to prove myself even more. So it's like you almost put on a mask
Hmm.
to be who you're not because I didn't have the experience. I had a lot of knowledge because I was reading and learning and asking
Yeah.
questions. So like, there's that push and pull when you don't have the experience and you have a lot of knowledge, it's the experience that helps you catapult forward and take risks. So I didn't really take many risks early on in my career, but I wanted to be that COO 5 years from then. So I had to look like and sometimes it could come across as cocky,
Hmm.
because at that time, when you have a mask on, you don't have the experience. It is kind of cocky because you have nothing to back it.
Right.
Later on in my career, when I was doing it for 20 some odd years, I had the experience and the confidence, and I was able to be more assertive than aggressive. So it was a transition early
Yeah.
on.
Well, but
You want to be bigger than you are.
yeah, but it's interesting to kind of look back and then the impact of the belief of you do the right thing, it's going to turn out right, and your
Mm,
goal is to be the CEO. So you're looking at it, okay, if I want it to turn out that way, then I have to act accordingly in order to be able to attain that goal, and that had a direct impact on your actions. So what changed? What was the shift? What happened in your mind to all of a sudden like shake this whole concept up of pursuing results, pursuing that success to now where you're at? Like, where did you start to make some shifts?
Well, I think the shifts started when I moved from working in materials management in the hospital and strategic planning and business development. I went into patient advocacy, which brought me closer to the patient's bedside,
Mm-hmm.
and bringing me closer there. That's when I realized the why of what I was doing. These people are in a scary place. Something's going on with them, and they're scared. And I started listening more to the patient and the family and doing the right thing by them. And the ironic piece is that's when I started getting in trouble in the hospitals because I wouldn't do it the way the administrators wanted me to. And I do recall the second to last hospital I worked at, I was let go. I was fired. And basically what was written down on the thing is Drew does his own thing.
Mm.
My own thing was doing right by the patients and the family. It just wasn't the right thing by my boss. Now, what I find ironic is when I went later on, I'm an entrepreneur now, and I have finally learned that I don't need to create rules as an entrepreneur. But I would like towards the end of my career in healthcare not listen to the rules.
Mm.
I would go rogue in the hospitals, and now as an entrepreneur, I was setting up the rules. So it was kind of weird.
isn't that isn't that
I'm
a big
kind of
shift?
like, yeah. I think I got it. I think I got it straight now. That I was backwards, but I really felt like I had an entrepreneurial brain in an industry that frowned upon that. It's like just
Yes.
stay in the square, and I
Well, they're
had to
trying to
stay.
sometimes mitigate risks, and so therefore they
Hmm.
have
Hmm.
systems and procedures, and
Yeah,
you got to
yeah.
follow these things. And I understand the need for some of that stuff, but then,
Hmm.
like you just said, you feel like you just lost the humanity. You lost the
Yeah,
do the right thing
yeah.
by
There was
the.
a lot of it turns in transactional in
Mm.
healthcare now rather than relational because there are a lot of guidelines and understandably so. It can be an unsafe place when complacency comes in.
Yeah.
But the key thing there was I really learned you cannot be complacent in any aspect of your life, especially when you're in the hospitals as a caregiver. And that's really where it all started to change for me. It's just I saw people acting like robots. It
Mm.
was like do this, do that. I have to do this. I have to do that, and they're missing the human element and the connection. And that's when so that the last hospital I was at, I got let go there too because again I did what I thought was the right thing and let go, and I never turned back. I never went back to
So,
healthcare.
so let me ask you this, because we talk about narratives and we talk about false
Yeah.
versus true narratives.
Hmm.
In aspect, kind of as we work through this, you mentioned earlier that the false narrative you had is to do the right thing and everything's going to turn out
Hmm.
correctly. And yet you're finding that the core element of who you are is to do the right thing.
Hmm.
So help me kind of understand, because it sounds like you're telling me that the false narrative is to do the right thing, but yet the true narrative is do the right thing. So help me understand how to bridge that gap between the two, because it almost seems like it's at odds with each other.
Yeah, yeah, it's more the way that you do the right thing rather than doing the right thing. And I wasn't taught this directly by my parents, but it was more like the outside world that men are supposed to suck it up. We're supposed to man up, right? Don't show emotions, just fix it, And so, I grew up knowing that I wanted to be a provider, a protector. Um, I also knew I was a sensitive person. Wasn't embarrassed to cry, but the reaction of other people if I did was like, there's no crying in baseball or this, so
Yep.
it's like, all right, I learned fast to wipe the tears, suck it up and do that. So most of my adult life was not asking for help. Um, when crisis would hit, shun the support systems and just get through it, Drew. Just fight it, get through it, be a man, be strong, that kind of thing. And that's what the issue is about doing the right thing, how you do the right thing versus doing the right thing. I mean, my integrity will never waver. I do the right thing when no one's watching, but it's how you do the right thing. Um, and I usually explain that with stories, but
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, that's a perfect transition to look into it and say, all right, how do you do the right thing? And so the question that always comes up here is, Drew, how are you creating and crafting your narrative now moving into the future? And what
yeah,
legacy are you leaving behind? Because that's our narrative. That's the narrative that we are writing.
mhm,
So I guess the question is, how do you do what methods do you use to do the right thing?
yeah. No, that's and I use very different methods now than I did 2, 3, 4 years ago. As I say, life is not linear; it's a circuitous path, and external circumstances come and get in the way of those letters. A plus B plus C equals D, and we are forced to choose. Now, sometimes we don't realize what's happening to us is a defining moment. We can ignore it. When we are aware and we see something as a defining moment, we have a choice. We can either run away or push through it. And my defining moment really was in July of 2015 when I found out from my best friend my wife was leaving me. And as I would say, I was blindsided. Men and women think differently. We have to agree on that. And I think it's crucial that each gender learns the thinking language of the other gender. But my wife and I say we communicated in silence. There was a lot of avoidance just because not wanting conflict and stuff like that. So that was the start of the whole thing. And then divorce was April of 2018, and then I was fired 6 months later
Wow.
from that hospital. I reported a HIPAA violation, just not in the timing that my boss wanted. See, I did the right thing. I reported that we lost patient information. She had asked me to wait a couple weeks and do more research. My ego got in the way and I did the right thing. I could have done the right thing differently. I could have done a little more research, knowing full well I wasn't going to find more. Wait the 2 weeks, tell her I did my research. She would have said, "Okay, report it." Anyway, I reported it, and I was fired for as a leadership change. And since I tied my self identity to external circumstances, my what I thought about myself was based on my wife and my job, and I lost both in 6 months.
Hmm.
And then 10 days after I lost my job, my son had suicidal ideation stemming from the divorce. And then my dad unexpectedly got sick and passed away on Christmas Eve, all in a 9 month span. And
Wow.
that's when things started to shift because I still went through all that. Uh, I didn't want to live anymore, but I really fought to find clarity of purpose in my life. And instead of finding that I needed to live for me, I wanted to help my mom after my dad's death, and my 3 children get through all this family turmoil. And so I did the right thing, helping them get through it. What I didn't do is take care of myself at the same time. So I did all the things that men are supposed to do: suck it up, man up, shun the support systems, no emotion. I helped them get through it. When I got through it, I was empty, man.
Hmm.
And it was at that point that I realized it was a better way to live. I just didn't know how to do it. And then started writing my book. And midway writing the book, I woke up and realized that I need to help men stop suffering in silence
So,
because men
and I
suffer
want
in
to,
silence.
well, and I want to talk about that part of it, but I don't want to skip over this aspect or realization
Yeah,
because too many times, especially men, we have that exact philosophy where we need to
hmm
help everybody else. We're there to basically give above and beyond what we even have to be able to give. And I don't want to skip over that part of it,
yep,
especially because of the fact that you were able to look at that and say, well, in one hand, I didn't want to live, but on the other hand, I knew that there was a better way.
hmm
And so you had these two ideas that are kind of going on. So I'm not sure how to ask the question, but I'll just throw it out there in this
yeah,
aspect. One is, how did it actually impact where you saw the value of your life? Because your identity
hmm
now that you rested in was completely gone from your
right,
wife to, I mean, all the other things that were going on, a lot of trauma.
right,
That was your identity. And now, in essence, that identity basically ended up getting buried in a grave,
hmm
and now
hmm
you have to reconstruct and look at your life and say, who in the world am I going to be? Who am I going to show up as? And
hmm
so there's value, there's self-confidence, there's identity, all of those things kind of tied into that. What
hmm
was that realization like? Was that like, I don't ever want to get up out of bed again? Was it, where did you go?
Well, it started with the don't want to get up out of bed again. The thing is, though, I knew from being a young kid, I love children. I always wanted to have kids. And I was blessed. I didn't lose all my identity. I was still a father.
Mm.
I was a father to 3 awesome kids. And I had vowed to be the best father I could be. Now, what kind of father would I be if I gave up?
Mm.
What message and lesson would I be teaching two gentlemen and one lady who I'm trying to help raise? What would I be teaching them if dad gave up, right? So that was really the strongest piece of the whole thing was, Drew, you're a damn good person. You're a good father. You were a good husband. Things just didn't work out. And I learned you can recreate your life every 15 minutes because the past doesn't define us.
Mm. I
And
love
I
that.
realized that all the stuff that happened, yes, I made choices that ended up with those results, but I don't have to be defined by my decisions, by the past, none of that. So today starts now. You could say that every second, today starts now, and it really does. And so my identity started to get building up with being the best father I could be, and then it has now transitioned to the best human being I can be. If I can live out of kindness and service, all of a sudden resentment's gone, regret's gone, all that stuff's gone. Um, I don't know. It's something I had to go through. There's purpose in the pain,
Yeah.
and I know I'm where I am stronger because of the adversity, not despite it. And I had to go through all that, and I wouldn't change 1 second of any of that because
Yeah.
I wouldn't be here talking to you now, and I wouldn't be here being able to help other men because I'm getting stronger every day. I'm still a work in progress.
Yeah, but I love that you found the positive. I love that you're taking, and you could have chosen to focus on all of the negative things that were going, but then instead, what you said is, I'm a good person. I know I am. I'm a great father. And I know I am. And so therefore, because you have that foundational aspect of who and how you were created,
Mm-hmm.
that's the positive aspect and focusing on that. So what do you do now? What do you do now to be able to maintain that? And maybe it's a habit, maybe it's a routine. You obviously have found your purpose, but what do you do at this point now that you've said, I'm going to rebuild and it's a growth process? What do you do?
Yeah. Well, throughout this whole transition, I learned that I've been a people pleaser my whole life,
Mm.
and when you look at people pleasing, the behaviors of people pleasing is often misconstrued as being nice, and it's really not about being nice. It's manipulative. If you think about when you do everything for everybody, you're pleasing them. Many times you do it because the return you get is you feel good. So people pleasers, which I did, I put on a mask all the time because if I wanted Tim to like me, and if I acted authentically and Tim didn't like me, well, in order to get Tim to like me, I have to be different from my authentic self. So I learned how to do that in every aspect. I mean, and it helped to an extent in business because it was like a chameleon. But the thing is, I always prided myself in being like, what you see is what you get, because I always admired those people
Mm.
who they were. I called them a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
It's like what you see is what you get. I admired the hell out of that, and I knew I could be that, and I am that, and I think that's what caused me to do what I'm doing now. It's all about authenticity. If I can get men, because once I started telling my story out loud, I started to heal myself from within,
Mm.
and we all can heal ourselves from within. And men don't tell their story. We don't ask for help. We don't show emotion. We keep it inside. Now, if you look at it, everything we're suppressing is toxic, right? It's not meant to be kept inside of us. Whether when you cry, you release natural tears. When you share your story or ask for help, you're getting rid of emotional toxins. Yet men are trained to keep all those toxins inside, which is why we're dying a lot younger than women are, why we're not being able to be around for our women or our children in life.
Mm.
So I work with men to help them define what they want their identity to be,
Mm.
because we can do that.
Yeah.
And once we know who we are, then I work with them to remove all the doubt they have about themselves.
Mm.
And usually that is burying the past, saying, addressing the past, saying that doesn't define me. It's not who I was. I forgive myself because I didn't have the tools to make different decisions. I'm here now. Get rid of all that internal doubt. Once you know who you are and you get rid of the doubt, then you can write your own story.
Yeah.
instead of letting others write it for you. So that's like
Yeah.
the process I do for the coaching and for everything else I do.
Yeah.
But
I,
I
I
have
love that it
practiced it on
combines with your
myself.
life. Like your
Yeah,
work is your life. I mean, like there's two
it
things that
is.
almost impossible to separate those two things.
I needed that because another narrative I think believe it's a lie is work life balance.
Mm.
Because 24 hours in a day, let's pretend we're sleeping for 8, you've got 16 more hours, right? And we go to work and we come home, and to compartmentalize those completely is, I think it's not smart to do, because there are a lot of strengths we have in our personal life that I've seen so many people not be able to take those strengths to work, and vice versa. Um,
You're preaching, man. I love it. I love it.
yeah, and so, and ironically for me, my desk where I am now is 3 feet from the base of my bed.
Mm.
So you talk about if you have to compartmentalize work and life, and why do it?
Yeah.
Because if I'm in my professional life, helping you, Tim, get over something that's bogged you down for your whole life, why can't I use that same stuff for my kids or for
Oh yeah.
myself,
Oh
right?
yep. Yep.
How many times do you hear people say, I don't follow my own advice. I give good advice, people
But you
follow
don't.
it, and they're good, and
Yeah.
I don't give it, right?
This is the whole thing with the shoemaker's kids are always shoeless. I mean, like that's just unfortunately the way it is.
Uh-huh,
Yeah, but
uh-huh.
oh man, I know for fact, and I know that you and I we're going to be sharing some stuff in the future
Great.
about the work-life balance, and I'm kind of excited for that because there's a little plug. So if you don't follow either of us on LinkedIn, you need to, because then you'll hear more
Yeah,
about it. But
absolutely.
I mean, we're kind of getting in here towards the end of this. And I honestly believe that we could potentially record for another 30, 45 minutes just talking about some of these things. But we got to wrap it up. So
Yep.
here's where we're going to go. And what would be, out of all the things that we talked about, or possibly something that's on your heart, what would be the one thing that you would want somebody to walk away with today from listening to this? What's that one thing?
Yeah. Be who you are. And this will sound crass, but don't care what other people think of you. Now, I'm not saying don't care about other people. Always care about other people. Don't care what they think about you, about any of your behaviors, your thoughts, and who you are. Because you are who you are. There's always going to be haters in life. There are always going to be people who are going to try to knock you down. I say know your worth and stand your ground.
Mm. So awesome. Good stuff. All right. How can they get in contact with you? I know we mentioned social media, LinkedIn, but what is the
Yeah.
best way to get in contact with you?
There are a few ways. I would say, if you want to talk, email me. We can get, you can get my calendar. It's Drew, Drew, at profitcompassion.com. Otherwise, you can go to profitcompassion.com. I have a free webinar called "Get Over Yourself: How to Use the Caveman Formula to Overcome Self-Sabotage." It's a free webinar. And then I also am a leader of a men's group called Tribal Stoics, Monday mornings, 10 a.m. Eastern. And that, again, you can find that on my website, the link to register. Probably the best way is to reach me.
So good. I mean, like all of this stuff. And I'm excited what we're going to see from you in the future because I know that you're building some things out. And this is my plug. I mean, like if you're not listening, following Drew, you need to go follow Drew. Because again, we've only known each other for just a few weeks now, or maybe a
Yeah,
month or
yeah,
so, and already
I'm a month.
I can tell we're definitely gonna see some really awesome things coming out of here. So, all right, again, thanks Drew for being here. Those that are listening,
Thanks for having me.
I gotta, you kind of go watch the YouTube channel. If you're just listening to the podcast, I understand you probably driving the car. Don't go do it now. Wait till you get home. But go watch the podcast or watch the podcast on YouTube and check it out there. And then I'm going to say this, and I tend to say this every time, but I mean this, and I know from the bottom of my heart, and again, I know from Drew, if something that we said impacted you today, I want you to reach out. We don't need you to buy anything. We don't want you to, we're not trying to sell you anything. We're not trying, all we want is to be able to connect and be able to hear your story and hear about the journey that you're taking and the things that you're overcoming. Because again, just like Drew said, we have to talk out our stories in order to start to heal. We've got to talk out those things in order to be able to get rid of some of that toxic aspect. So please, please, please reach out, whether it's through email, through contact on social media, however you do that, make sure you reach out because that is to us the most impactful, fulfilling aspect of everything that we do. So again, thank you, Drew. And until next time, until the next story, next journey comes out, keep crafting, keep writing your narrative, and man, just live life to the fullest. So we'll see you guys.